Good morning, students. We are going to go ahead and start in our week 12 slideshow. So go ahead and open this up on your own tab. Go ahead and click the spacebar button so you can open this up on your own. Okay, hopefully you're back. Yesterday I put this up. Have your parents get a textbook that I sent to the admin building, and also drop off refugee when you go to pick up your textbook. So you want to get that by tomorrow because tomorrow we're going to be starting in our textbook. And then we're going to be working. You worked yesterday and today on drafting your essay. So, some things I want to go over: how to correctly put in dialogue. So when you have a couple people talking in your story. Notice how this is the quote. Mahmoud, what are you doing? His father cried. His father cried is not in quotation marks because that's his father, and cried is not what's being said. It's only around what's being said, or in this case, asked. And we have a question mark because it is a question. So Mahmoud, he's yelling, what are you doing? Right? And the quotation marks go on the outside of the punctuation marks. Now, if a new person starts talking, you want to go to the next line, press enter. And Waleed responds with, we're walking to Austria, Waleed said. And it actually could say Waleed exclaimed because it's an exclamation mark, right? Then it goes on, Dad showed them the map on his phone, period. But it's a 12-hour walk, he said. So notice Dad is just saying, but it's a 12-hour walk. He said is talking about the person who said it, in this case, Dad. So we have to put a comma separating who is talking and what they're saying. Okay. In this case, we didn't need a comma because it was somebody like screaming something or yelling something. And in this case, we didn't need a comma because it was a question, right? So let's look at a different example. I don't want to, I said, right? Someone's yelling. We don't need a comma here. We do need a period here. I don't want to. We need a comma and a period here. Or it could just be, I don't want to. Or do I have to, question mark, I said. Okay, so make sure you're putting the dialogue and who is talking or asking. It doesn't always have to be said. It could be asked or replied. So today you're continuing your drafting by inserting some transition words. So I'm going to show you kind of a boring way of how a story might be, how you were taught in elementary to kind of say, first I did this, then I did this, then I did that. So I took a paragraph out of my story that doesn't really have any good transitions. One time, Grandma and I both had a bad day. I had one of the worst days of my teaching career. I left my classroom and walked out without my backpack to my car with only my keys and phone in hand. Then I cried in my car. So you notice it's very just, first I did this, then I did this, then I did this, right? It goes in a logical order. It makes sense, but it isn't very engaging. It doesn't have a lot of flow to the story. And you notice I start sentences with like I, or then. And we don't want to do that. We want to start with transition words. So some transition words could be in the meantime, or later, or suddenly, or after a while, or before long. Okay, so these are sentence starters rather than just starting with I had, or I left, or then. You could use a transition word or phrase. And these aren't all the transition words or phrases you could use. If I actually go to Google and put in transition words, okay, you can click images and you're going to get a bunch of different charts that you could use. Furthermore, in addition, that one's kind of formal. Maybe let's try this one. Obviously, no, that one's not the best either. Especially, following, first, second, thirdly. Similarly, therefore. Okay, you can use some of these as sentence starters. So notice how my story changes when I add some transitions of time to the start of my sentences. 5 years ago was when Grandma and I both had a day that was a pain in the you-know-what. I didn't just say one time. I was specific. 5 years ago. Then I didn't start the next sentence with I. I said, that day at school, year 2 of teaching, was one of the worst days of my teaching career. So I'm kind of giving you a time frame. I left my usually organized room totally unkempt as I walked out without my backpack to my car with only my keys and phone in hand. So, besides adding transitions, I'm also adding details. I didn't just say I left my room and walked out without my backpack and keys. I am giving some weighted words. I'm saying I left my usually organized room totally unkempt. Okay. And then another transition. As I exited the school, I half-heartedly waved to students. So half-heartedly is like a weighted word. I half-heartedly waved to students who yelled my name cheerfully. So I'm painting a picture of how I'm leaving the school rather than just saying I left and got in my car, right? I'm painting a picture of how I got to my car. Kids are like waving at me. I'm trying to hide my tears. Once in my car, I didn't just say I cried. I said I let the waterfalls flow. So this is a great example of me adding transitions that are underlined and bolded, but I also have some weighted words and description because I'm trying to illustrate to you as the reader what it looks like. So I want you to try and add some transitions in your writing. Then tomorrow is your final drafting day, and you really want to take a look at your conclusion, because if you look at our rubric for a 4 says that a conclusion has a reflective ending. And it answers the 2 questions: what did I learn? What was the life lesson? And how is this lesson relevant to today? And then we got to check yourself, which is the next slide 10. So we want to make sure our conclusion is actually a paragraph long and it's an insightful reflection to get a 4. So it has to be insightful by answering these 2 questions. What did you learn from your elder, and how has that lesson affected you still today? So here's how I went back and did this. I said, Grandma always had a way of making me feel okay, even when my life felt like it was falling apart. I walked away from her house with my head held higher than it was before I left school. I was still uncertain, but I knew my family had my back. The lesson I learned from Grandma is failure is going to happen in life, but you can never achieve perfection. So right here, I answered the lesson that I learned from her. And then I'm going to answer how that lesson has affected me today, because she's passed away, but I still remember that day in my head. So I say now, notice I'm using a transition word. Now today in year 7 of teaching, Grandma's lesson still has an effect on me, because on hard days, I try and give myself some grace. Okay, for once that McDonald's meal was a healthy dose of what I needed. So if you're answering these 2 questions and kind of bringing it back, centering this paragraph about the person you're writing about dad, about the tutor, about grandma or grandpa, or whoever you're writing about, it should be about 4 to 5 sentences for your conclusion. All right, answering those 2 questions. And then you want to make sure that you're checking yourself. Your introduction starts in one of those 4 ways. Your conclusion is an insightful reflection, answering those 2 questions from slide 9. You have a beginning, a middle, and end to your story. Even with flashbacks, your story makes sense in a logical order. You insert at least 3 signposts: aha moment, maybe a tough question, maybe a memory moment, okay? At least 3. I put all 6 in. And then you have some weighted words to add sensory detail or some descriptive detail to paint a picture for the reader. So today and tomorrow are your last days to draft, and this final copy will be due to me on Wednesday by midnight. So I look forward to reading these. We'll talk soon.